Mr. Kraske.
Hello and welcome in the Bruno Kraske Forum in Vienna. Today with a special guest, Gideon Levy. He arrived just a few hours ago from Tel Aviv. And here we have almost the same climate like in Tel Aviv. It's hot, the humidity is high. We are sitting now in Bruno Kraske's room where he talked with his guests. We see all his books around, pictures, Kraske together with his guests. So how is it to be here in Vienna in this special atmosphere for you?
If I could make one wish now, it would have been that Kraske will come in now and sit next to us. I don't think, not because I'm here, for many years I think so, I don't think that I would like to meet many people from history as much as I would like to meet this man.
You are journalists, and journalists normally ask questions. So what would you like to ask Bruno Kraske?
I would like, first of all, to tell him a little bit about Israel that he cared so much about, and he was the first one maybe to criticize as Israel deserves to be criticized. I think before asking a question, I would praise him for his courage, because I have no doubts that he cared very much about the future of Israel. And unlikely most of the Israelis who thought that he is a self-hating Jew and that he is anti-Semitic, even they called him, I really thought that he is a real friend. Because a real friend cares about his friends and about their future. And Kraske did care about the future of Israel, side by side with caring about human rights, international law, the Palestinian rights. And first of all, I would have praised him. And then maybe I would have asked him some questions like, what would happen if you would have made Aliyah and come in '39 to Palestine? I guess he would end up as a bankier or a clerk in the unions. I don't think he would have done the same career in Israel.
But it would have been a pity for Austrian politics, at least.
Absolutely, and for world politics.
Yeah.
But which brings me to the thought that many Jews who came to Israel lost their dreams, their ambitions, their career, and their chance, really. And obviously, I'm thinking also about my father, who wouldn't he come to Israel, would he stay in Europe, wouldn't be the Holocaust, I guess my father would have had a better life in Europe. I'm sure about it.
So your father moved to Palestine in 1939.
Right.
He came from SARS, from the Sudetenland. Also your mother, Thea, she also came from the former Czechoslovakia. What would you say, what has changed? They arrived with a lot of hopes behind them, the Holocaust, the experiences, or also your grandfather, your grandmother has died during the Shoah. And they arrived to Israel with a lot of hope to this new land.
So I have to separate between my father and my mother. They didn't arrive together. My mother was 16. She was sent to a kibbutz, and she became much quicker a kind of Israeli. She spoke better Hebrew, she read Hebrew, she wrote Hebrew. I mean, she found her place. My father was 26 in '39. He said goodbye to his parents and to his fiancée in the railway station in Prague, and he never saw them again. My mother, her parents came to Palestine in '42, but they came. My father never met them again. My father was half a year on a boat between Europe and Palestine until he was allowed into Israel, including a detention camp in Beirut, Lebanon. And he came to Israel with a PhD in law from the Prague University, and he started his life with baking cakes together with his sister Zuse. He was Heinz, she was Zuse. And on his bicycles, he went from door to door and offered his cakes. This is what he had done in his first years. And I think my father never found his place in Israel. I mean, he had a full life and happy life, but he never felt part of. He really belonged to Europe. He didn't find his place in Palestine. He couldn't understand how anybody can call between 2 and 4 while the Schlafstunde. He couldn't understand how can anybody have an overdraft in the bank. Those were things that
he couldn't imagine.
Yeah, I couldn't imagine. It's unfassbar, yeah? Unfassbar, you say. Unfassbar.
Unfassbar.
Unfassbar. And so it was very different. And he had a good life, but he was never really a devoted Zionist. If there wouldn't be the Shoah, he wouldn't never bother to come to Israel.
Would you describe yourself as a Zionist?
No, I'm not a Zionist long time ago. No. It was a gradual. I was brought up as a Zionist. I was a Zionist most of my life. But in recent years, I can't identify anymore with Zionism because today Zionism stands for apartheid. It's very clear. And I can't identify myself with apartheid. But I totally identify myself as an Israeli, and I belong there and I will never leave there. But Zionism is an ideology that if you really check it without any previous beliefs and lies, if you really check it, what is Zionism? It's about Jewish supremacy in Palestine. And this could be very nice and good if you ignore the fact that there is another people in Palestine.
You were, in former times, a strong supporter of the two-state solution, which here in Europe is still regarded as the best and the only solution, but you changed your mind. You are now of the opinion it's better to go in the direction to have one state. Why this change in your mind?
I think that most of the European leaders who support the two-state solution know the truth that this solution was excellent, but is totally irrelevant anymore, even those who support it. And I met some of them, and they would tell you in a closed door, behind closed door, that yes, we know that there is no chance anymore for the two-state solution, but we have to continue because if we go against the two-state solution, it means really restarting everything and resetting everything. The two-state solution was relevant as long as we could really divide the land. With 700,000 settlers in the West Bank, Jewish settlers, who will never be evacuated from there, you cannot really divide the land. You can have some Palestinian Bantustans, but not a viable Palestinian state. This is over. And then you have to ask yourself, do you continue to speak about the two-state solution knowing that it will never take place? Or you look for something else, because continuing the status quo is the worst. And the only alternative is to start to talk about equal rights.
And do you think this will happen now? We have now the situation that the era of Bibi Netanyahu is over, at least for now. We have a new prime minister. You wrote already last August, if I remember correctly, that he might be the next prime minister, Naftali Bennett. Now he is at the helm of the new government, which is a very broad one with 8 parties. Do you think that there is a new chance, any kind of hope for bringing Israelis and Palestinians closer together, or is it quite the contrary?
Unfortunately, it's quite the contrary. There is no chance, because this government may bring some changes to Israel, but there is one issue which they are not going to change whatsoever, and this is the Palestinian problem. They will continue to deny the problem, to deny the rights, to support the Jewish supremacy, and to do nothing to solve any of the problems that the occupation and the challenges that the occupation presents to us. And therefore, the ball is really in the hands of the international community. Because from Israel, you can't expect anything. Israelis will not wake up one morning and say, oh, this is not so nice, the occupation, let's put an end to it. This will not happen.
Normally, the pressure comes from the United States. We have now there a new president, Biden, with a different approach. What do we expect from him?
Again, I'm very sorry to be very skeptical, but I think that Biden will try to distance himself as much as he can. He saw what happens when the United States tries a little harder under 8 years
Obama.
of Obama, exactly, who really understood it and whose heart was for sure in the right place, and he didn't do anything. Maybe he couldn't do anything, but he did nothing about the Middle East, nothing, but really nothing, except of continuing supporting Israel and financing Israel and arming Israel. I think that Biden understands that his power is limited. He will try to keep things under control, but don't expect any revolution under Biden. This will still wait for maybe the next Democrat president who will be maybe more leftist, because in the Democratic Party you see other voices, by the way, voices that you don't hear in Europe. The Democratic Party today in the United States, the left wing of the Democratic Party speaks in a more radical way than any left party in Europe today.
Are you disappointed what happens here in Europe? Because it seems that, well, the Palestinian issue is not that important anymore, and well, the Europeans keep distance, at least to describe it in an honest way.
I'm deeply disappointed because of two reasons. The first reason, I had really high expectations from the Europeans, more than from the Americans. I truly believe that people like Bruno Kraske and leaders who came after him really cared and really understood what should be done. And I thought they will have the guts one day to do what is needed to do. And what is needed to do is to stop to talk and to stop to condemn Israel and to start to take actions, like Europe took actions towards South Africa. It was not about condemning South Africa. It was about boycotting South Africa. And then the change came. But the other really disappointing fact is that Israel, with its new strategy, namely labeling any criticism of Israel as anti-Semitism, succeeded to shut the mouth of Europe, to paralyze Europe. Today, Europeans are afraid to speak out against Israel because they will be accused as anti-Semites. This is really about freedom of speech. This is really about European democracy. I hear from journalists, they don't dare to criticize Israel because immediately the Jewish lobby will accuse them as anti-Semites. This is a very deep disappointment.
But aren't you also disappointed by the Palestinian leadership? Because, well, President Abbas is in power for so many years now, and he tried to, under European pressure, especially from Angela Merkel, he announced that there will be elections, but he cancelled it a few weeks ago. And nobody knows what will happen after Abbas. So who will succeed? Nobody knows.
I'm afraid to tell you that it's not so important. They really tried everything and they failed in everything. And I don't see that any Palestinian leader has a chance at all to change Israeli policy. Will he go for the armed struggle? He will be condemned. Will he go for diplomacy? He will be condemned. Will he go for the legal path, namely the international law, ICC? He will be condemned. I mean, whatever they will do, they have no chance. So yes, it's shameful that the Palestinians are not united. It is shameful they don't have a leadership. It's time for Abbas to go, long time ago. Corruption, you name it. I'm really sick and tired of all of those phenomena. But by the end of the day, let's remember that from the beginning they don't have a real chance, because whatever they tried failed. They tried diplomacy.
But when I listen what you said in the last 50 minutes, to sum it up, there is no sign of hope for the next decade, because you said, well, we have to wait for the next democratic leadership. So, well, that's quite a pessimistic outlook.
It is pessimistic, but in the same time, you have to remember that many things in history happen when they are totally unexpected. Nobody, but really nobody, had expected the Berlin Wall to fall, Soviet Russia to fall, and apartheid South Africa to fall. And it happened within months. So many times you really lose hope, and all of a sudden the unexpected is happening. If you ask me if I can draw a scenario in which in 10 years we'll be in a better place, I can't draw this scenario. But if you ask me, is it totally unthinkable that all of a sudden this whole project of occupation, of colonialization, of racism and Jewish supremacy will all of a sudden collapse? Sure, there is a chance for it.
Thank you, Mr. Levy.
Thank you. Thank you very much.